We certainly can't control the President of the United States, but we can control our defense investments, who we award contracts to, and how we are ultimately able to create jobs in Canada. So we're going to focus on that. That was Melanie Joly, Canada's Minister of Industry, speaking to CBC News on January 18, 2026, after Swedish aerospace giant Saab submitted a formal proposal to Ottawa. 72 Gripen fighter jets, 6 GlobalEye surveillance platforms, 12,600 Canadian jobs, manufacturing facilities in Ontario and Quebec, complete independence from American defense monopoly, 88 F-35 aircraft ordered from Lockheed Martin, $27 billion contract signed in 2022, first 16 jets arriving this year. But Trump's tariff chaos and annexation rhetoric forcing Canada to reconsider every commitment to American suppliers. While Trump threatened Canadian sovereignty with military language, Canada explored alternatives that eliminate U.S. dependency. While Trump weaponized defense contracts as political leverage, Ottawa discovered European partners offering domestic manufacturing. While Trump assumed Canada had no options beyond American systems, Swedish engineers designed a pathway to complete strategic autonomy. The reversal is stunning. America's largest defense export market just discovered it doesn't need Washington's permission. Saturday, January 14, 2026, CBC News breaks the story. Saab confirms the numbers publicly for the first time. 72 Gripen E fighters, 6 GlobalEye airborne early warning aircraft. Total package creates 12,600 direct and indirect jobs across Canada. Previous estimates suggested about 10,000 jobs, but lacked specifics. No aircraft quantities, no timeline, no production locations. Industry observers dismissed it as vague corporate marketing. This announcement is different. Precise commitments, specific factories, named Canadian partners. Simon Carroll, president of Saab Canada, states explicitly, Saab remains ready to support the government of Canada with sovereign, cutting-edge solutions for the Canadian Armed Forces that will grow domestic industry. Notice the language, sovereign, cutting-edge, grow domestic industry. Every phrase deliberately contrasts with F-35 dependency. The industrial structure is comprehensive. Final assembly in Canada, integration performed by Canadian technicians, test operations conducted at Canadian facilities, sustainment managed domestically. Partners include IMP Aerospace, GE Aviation, CAE, and Peraton. Supply chain spans entire nation. Ontario hosts primary production centers. Quebec manufactures surveillance platforms in partnership with Bombardier. GlobalEye uses Bombardier's Global 6500 business jet as foundation, Canadian aircraft, Canadian assembly, Canadian workforce, Swedish surveillance systems installed on Canadian platforms, creating hybrid aircraft controlled entirely by Ottawa. Compare that to F-35 procurement. Every component manufactured in the United States, every maintenance procedure requires American approval, every software update controlled by Pentagon, every operational decision constrained by Washington's security architecture. Saab's model is fundamentally different. Manufacturing technology transferred to Canada, intellectual property shared with Canadian firms. Production capability remains in Canadian hands permanently. Export authorization granted to Ottawa for third-party sales. That final point is critical. Canada doesn't just build Gripens for Royal Canadian Air Force. Canada produces aircraft for global export markets. Ukraine already expressed interest in acquiring more than 100 Gripen fighters. France and Germany evaluating GlobalEye for airborne surveillance needs. Saab explicitly designs Canadian production to serve European and global customers. This transforms Canada from defense consumer to defense exporter. From dependency to sovereignty, from client to competitor, timing matters. Canada committed to purchasing 88 F-35 aircraft in 2022. Total cost now exceeds $27 billion. First 16 jets scheduled for delivery starting this year. But remainder of contract, 72 additional F-35s, remains under review. No confirmed decision on whether full order proceeds. Government officially reassessing procurement strategy based on operational and industrial criteria. Translation, Ottawa weighing whether locking into American systems makes strategic sense when partner threatening annexation. Trump's actions created this opening. Every tariff threat, every annexation comment, every insult about Canadian sovereignty. Each incident reinforces Ottawa's conclusion that dependency on American defense infrastructure represents unacceptable vulnerability. Minister Joly's comments confirm the shift. We can control our defense investments, who we award contracts to, and how we are ultimately able to create jobs in Canada. That statement would have been unthinkable 5 years ago. Canadian Defense Minister publicly declaring independence from American procurement, politically impossible under previous administrations. Trump changed everything, made the politically impossible strategically necessary. For decades, Canadian defense procurement operated under unstated assumption, buy American. NATO interoperability requires compatible systems. NORAD integration demands shared platforms. Continental defense necessitates unified command structures. All arguments pointed toward F-35, Lockheed Martin's fifth-generation stealth fighter, operated by United States Air Force, Marine Corps, Navy, deployed across NATO alliance, integrated into every American combat system. Choosing F-35 meant seamless cooperation with largest military ally. Selecting alternative aircraft meant potential interoperability complications. That logic dominated Canadian defense planning for generation. Previous governments accepted American monopoly as unavoidable reality. Geographic proximity and alliance commitments left no practical alternatives. Trump destroyed that consensus, demonstrated that alliance with the United States provides no immunity from economic coercion or political threats, proved that buying American weapons doesn't prevent tariffs on Canadian steel, aluminum, lumber, dairy, showed that no matter how closely Canada aligns with Washington, American presidents view northern neighbor as subordinate territory rather than sovereign partner. That realization reshapes every procurement decision. If alliance provides no protection from American aggression, why accept dependency on American weapon systems? Defense experts warned against switching. Justin Massey, head of political science department at University of Quebec, argued there's no guarantee Americans would agree to integrate Swedish-made Gripens into NORAD's defense systems. Massey continued, if all of this is just to have a fleet of 16 F-35s, we've already committed to 16. It's completely pointless from a military point of view. But Massey's argument reveals outdated thinking, assumes Canada needs American permission to defend itself, assumes NORAD integration is non-negotiable requirement, assumes Washington holds veto power over Canadian defense architecture. All assumptions Trump himself demolished. If United States threatens military annexation of Allied territory, why would Canada prioritize American comfort in selecting defense systems? Melanie Joly's response addresses this directly. We can't control the President of the United States, but we can control our defense investments. That's the new Canadian position. Washington's preferences are acknowledged but no longer determinative. Alliance matters, but sovereignty matters more. Public opinion supports the shift. Abacus data polling from December 2025 shows clear Canadian preferences. 43% want federal government to acquire full Gripen fleet, completely ditching F-35s. 29% favor mixed fleet combining Gripens with reduced F-35 order. Only 13% support single fleet of exclusively F-35 aircraft. Regional variations are revealing. Quebec and British Columbia, provinces most skeptical of American influence, show strongest opposition to F-35 only procurement. 9% support in both provinces. Even in Alberta, Canada's most conservative province, where a subset of voters advocate joining United States, F-35 only option receives just 18% backing, partisan breakdown equally telling. Conservative voters show highest F-35 support, but still split. Liberal, NDP, and Green supporters overwhelmingly favor Gripen or mixed alternatives. This isn't close call. Overwhelming Canadian majority rejects exclusive dependence on American fighter aircraft. Numbers tell the strategic story. Saab proposal, 72 Gripen fighters, 6 globalized surveillance aircraft, 12,600 Canadian jobs, manufacturing in Ontario and Quebec, partnership with Bombardier, production for export markets. Lockheed Martin counteroffer, maintain full 88 aircraft F-35 order, $15 billion in Canadian work share, no domestic final assembly, no intellectual property transfer, no export authorization. Compare the industrial impact. Saab builds factories, transfers technology, trains Canadian engineers, creates permanent aerospace manufacturing capability that persists beyond initial contract. Lockheed Martin supplies components. Canadian firms manufacture parts to American specifications. Technology remains controlled by Pentagon. Production knowledge stays in United States. One model builds Canadian sovereignty. Other perpetuates dependency. Consider export potential. Gripen production in Canada serves global markets. Ukraine's interest in 100-plus fighters represents massive opportunity. If Canadian facilities produce those aircraft, Ottawa captures manufacturing revenue, sustains workforce, strengthens aerospace sector. European demand for GlobalEye creates additional markets. France, Germany, potentially other NATO allies seeking airborne surveillance. Canadian-built platforms serving European customers generates decades of manufacturing activity. F-35 offers none of that. Even if Canadian firms supply components, final assembly occurs in the United States. Export sales benefit Lockheed Martin, not Canadian economy. Financial projections underscore difference. Saab's 12,600 jobs sustained over a 40-year production lifespan, not temporary construction employment. Permanent aerospace manufacturing workforce. Those jobs span entire supply chain. Engineers designing systems, technicians assembling aircraft, quality control specialists testing platforms, supply chain managers coordinating components from pan-Canadian network. Bombardier partnership adds another dimension. GlobalEye uses Global 6500 business jet as foundation. Bombardier already manufactures that aircraft in Quebec. Adding surveillance systems creates higher value production without building entirely new platform. This leverages existing Canadian aerospace strength, Bombardier's global reputation for business aircraft, CAE's world-leading flight simulation technology, IMP Aerospace's maintenance expertise, GE Aviation's engine capabilities. Saab integrates all those Canadian firms into unified production system, creates aerospace cluster rivaling anything in United States or Europe, compared to current F-35 arrangements. Lockheed Martin promises $15 billion in workshare. Sounds impressive until examining details. Spread across 88 aircraft, delivered over decades, mostly component manufacturing to American specifications. Canadian firms remain subcontractors, execute tasks assigned by Lockheed Martin, no control over production processes, no ownership of intellectual property, no authorization for independent sales. Saab offers opposite model. Canadian firms become partners, share technology and production knowledge, gain capacity to manufacture and export independently. That distinction matters profoundly. Subcontractors depend on continuing American contracts. Partners control their own destiny. Geopolitical context amplifies Saab's advantages. European Union committed $1.3 trillion military procurement expansion over next decade. Canada participates in EU defense initiatives following 2025 summit, where Prime Minister Carney strengthened transatlantic partnerships. If Canadian facilities produce Gripen fighters and GlobalEye surveillance aircraft, those platforms compete for European contracts. Canada becomes supplier to EU defense buildup rather than observer. European nations increasingly skeptical of American defense monopoly. Trump's unpredictability and threats against allies drive diversification efforts. European leaders seeking alternatives to exclusive U.S. dependency. Canadian manufactured Gripen addresses that demand. NATO-compatible aircraft, proven operational capability, manufactured in stable democracy by trusted ally. No exposure to American political chaos. France and Germany already examining GlobalEye. Sweden operates successful Gripen fleet. Poland, Czech Republic, Hungary potential customers. Nordic-Baltic region exploring expanded Gripen procurement. If Canada establishes production capacity, Ottawa positions itself as alternative supplier to entire European theater, transforms from defense consumer to strategic partner in European security architecture. What does the United States lose? Largest defense export customer. Canada currently purchases more American military equipment than any ally except perhaps Japan and South Korea. F-35 contract worth $27 billion represents massive revenue for Lockheed Martin. Losing that sale, or even reducing it from 88 to 16 aircraft, costs American defense industry billions. But financial loss is smallest concern. Strategic loss is catastrophic. If Canada successfully establishes independent fighter aircraft production, demonstrates to every U.S. ally that alternatives exist. Japan exploring domestic fighter development, South Korea building indigenous aircraft, European nations launching future combat air system, Australia examining options beyond American monopoly. Every ally watches Canadian decision. If Ottawa successfully pivots from F-35 to Gripen while maintaining NATO interoperability, proves that American warnings about compatibility were exaggerated. NORAD integration becomes test case. Justin Massey warned Americans might not integrate Swedish aircraft into continental defense systems. But can Washington actually refuse? If Canada operates Gripen fleet, United States faces choice: integrate those aircraft into NORAD or accept gaps in continental air defense. Second option is strategically unacceptable, leaves northern approaches undefended. So Washington will integrate Gripens, might complain, might drag feet initially, but ultimately cannot afford continental defense vulnerability. Once that integration succeeds, eliminates primary argument against non-American aircraft, proves allies can operate diverse platforms within NATO framework, opens floodgates for European, Japanese, South Korean alternatives. American defense industry loses monopoly permanently, can no longer claim interoperability, requires buying American, cannot weaponize alliance commitments to force procurement decisions. Political leverage evaporates. Trump threatened tariffs to coerce Canadian compliance. But if Canada controls its own defense production, American threats lose bite. Cannot sanction Canadian aircraft manufacturing without damaging NATO. Cannot block Gripen exports to Ukraine without alienating European allies. Cannot punish Bombardier without attacking Quebec aerospace industry that supplies commercial aviation globally. Trump's negotiating position collapses. Assumed Canada had no alternatives. Assumed dependency on American systems gave Washington permanent leverage. Assumed threats would force capitulation. All assumptions wrong. Canada developed alternatives. Sweden provided technology. Europe created markets. Manufacturing capability transfers to Canadian soil. Infrastructure creates permanence. Once Saab establishes production facilities in Ontario and Quebec, those factories operate for decades, cannot be relocated quickly, cannot be shut down without massive economic disruption. Workforce develops specialized skills. Engineers master Gripen systems. Technicians gain expertise in advanced manufacturing. Supply chains establish relationships. Knowledge embeds in Canadian aerospace sector. 40-year production timeline means 2 generations of Canadian workers build these aircraft. Students entering university today retire having spent entire careers in Gripen manufacturing. Institutional knowledge becomes Canadian asset. Intellectual property transfer cements sovereignty. Saab shares design specifications, production processes, systems integration knowledge. Canadian engineers learn to modify, upgrade, maintain aircraft independently. Eventually, Canada could develop indigenous variants, adapt Gripen airframe for specific Arctic requirements, integrate Canadian-designed avionics, create unique capabilities unavailable elsewhere. That progression mirrors Sweden's own aerospace evolution. Saab started with licensed production of foreign designs, gradually developed indigenous capability, now exports globally competitive advanced fighters. Canada follows same path. Begins with licensed Gripen production, absorbs technology and knowledge, builds independent capability, potentially designs future indigenous aircraft. F-35 offers none of that progression. Lockheed Martin never transfers fundamental technology, never shares core intellectual property, never enables independent production. Buying F-35 means permanent dependency. 20 years from now, Canada still depends on American permission for every modification, every upgrade, every operational decision. Building Gripen means eventual autonomy. 20 years from now, Canada potentially operates fully sovereign aerospace sector capable of designing and manufacturing advanced military aircraft. Bombardier partnership accelerates that timeline. GlobalEye production transfers airborne surveillance technology to Canadian hands. CAE integration adds simulation and training expertise. IMP Aerospace contribution develops maintenance capabilities. Combined effect creates comprehensive Canadian aerospace industrial base, rivaling established powers, not immediately, but progressively, systematically, permanently. European export markets sustain that capability. Ukraine's need for 100+ Gripens provides production volume maintaining factories for years. French and German GlobalEye interest adds surveillance platform manufacturing. Additional European customers extend production timelines further. Canadian facilities don't just serve Royal Canadian Air Force. They supply European defense build-out, potentially Asian allies, eventually any customer Ottawa approves. That export authorization is critical. Saab grants Canada full rights to sell aircraft produced domestically. No American veto, no Washington approval required. Ottawa decides independently. Compare to F-35 exports. Even if Canada manufactured entire aircraft domestically, couldn't sell to third parties without Pentagon permission. American international traffic and arms regulations control every transfer. Washington holds absolute veto. Gripen sales require only Swedish and Canadian agreement. Two democratic allies coordinating export policy. No third-party interference. No American political manipulation. Trump cannot stop this, cannot tariff Swedish technology transfer, cannot sanction Bombardier without attacking commercial aviation, cannot block European sales without alienating NATO allies, cannot militarily intervene, cannot weaponize NORAD integration because continental defense requires cooperation, cannot punish Canada without destroying alliance credibility with every partner. Trump has zero leverage. Every threat strengthens Canadian resolve. Every tariff justifies diversification. Every annexation comment validates Swedish alternative. From Canadian perspective, this is liberation. No longer hostage to American political chaos, no longer vulnerable to presidential tantrums, no longer dependent on Washington's goodwill. From European perspective, this is validation, proves alternatives to American defense monopoly work, demonstrates NATO interoperability doesn't require buying American, shows allies can cooperate without U.S. domination. From Swedish perspective, this is breakthrough. Gripen sales in North America, production facilities in allied democracy, foothold in market previously monopolized by Lockheed Martin. Canada's Swedish fighter choice crushes U.S. defense exports. Trump's threats backfired catastrophically, and North American defense architecture permanently transformed. What do you think? Is Canada's pivot to Swedish Gripen a temporary negotiating tactic, or the beginning of a permanent break from American defense dependency that reshapes NATO procurement across the alliance?